to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, your window into relationship, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines. This is our trauma-informed leadership series, and I am Krista Fee. Today, we're stepping into the science, specifically the science of trauma in leadership. Now, if you are a leader, you may not think of yourself as a neuroscientist or a psychologist. If you're leading people, you're leading nervous systems, and nervous systems shaped by trauma respond differently. If we ignore that, we risk breaking the very communities that we're trying to serve. But if we understand it, and if we lead through the science, we can change lives. Let me tell you about the police chief and the panic button. A few years ago, I worked with a police chief who couldn't understand why his officers always seemed so reactive. He told me, Krista, it feels like I'm walking on eggshells. The smallest change sets my team off. What he didn't realize was that his officers were not overreacting. They were literally carrying years of cumulative trauma. Domestic violence calls, fatal accidents, line of duty losses. Their nervous systems were literally primed to respond like a panic button, even when the threat wasn't imminent. His leadership began shifting that day. He started to understand that trauma isn't weakness, it's physiology. And once he saw the science, he started leading differently. He became a regulator instead of a trigger, and that really started to change his department. So let's dive into what trauma does in your body. We'll ground this even deeper in the science. Trauma isn't just an event. It's literally an imprint that's left on your body and brain. When something overwhelming happens, your nervous system makes adaptations to survive. These adaptations are brilliant in the moment, but they come at an often very heavy price. In your brain, trauma rewires the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala becomes overreactive, always scanning for threat. The hippocampus, which stores your memory, struggles to place experiences in time. So the past feels like it's still happening. And the prefrontal cortex, the part of you that makes rational decisions, gets hijacked. In your body, trauma is stored physiologically. Your muscles stay tense. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Your heart rate, your breath, and your digestion changes. The body learns to live in a high-stress survival mode. And your mind, trauma distorts your perception. People may see neutral situations as dangerous and misinterpret other people's intentions through the lens of those past wounds. Now, why does this matter for leadership, you might ask? Because when you're leading people with trauma histories, and almost every single person has one, these adaptations shape how they respond to your leadership. So here's the connection to leadership. Dysregulation versus regulation. A trauma-informed leader recognizes that every meeting, every briefing, every conflict is happening not just in the room, but in the nervous systems of every single person present. If you speak with unpredictability, shame, or intimidation, you activate survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But if you speak with clarity, calm, and consistency, you create safety. And safety opens the door for trust, collaboration, and growth. The science is really quite simple, but it is profound. Leaders either regulate or dysregulate the groups that they serve. Let's look at this through a historical lens, like wartime leadership. In World War II, General Eisenhower was known not just for strategy, but for his presence. Before D-Day, he walked among his troops. He looked them in the eye. He carried himself with calm confidence. Now, did that eliminate their fear? Of course not. But it regulated them. Their nervous systems took cues from his. And because of that, they could function under unthinkable stress. Eisenhower didn't just lead armies, he led nervous systems. So let's look at today, the crisis of the trauma-saturated workplace. Today, leaders in schools, hospitals, law enforcement, military, nonprofits, and corporations are leading trauma-saturated environments. Teachers face students carrying household trauma. Supervisors manage employees juggling invisible wounds. Commanders guide troops with combat and family stress, all layered together. And here's the kicker. Most leaders were never trained in trauma science. They were never taught strategy, operations, maybe even emotional intelligence, but not the psychology or physiology of trauma. That gap explains why so many leadership efforts fail. You could have the best strategy in the world, but if your team is dysregulated, it just won't hold. So here's the neuroscience secret of co-regulation. Let's return to the nervous system. One of the most powerful concepts or tools for the leadership toolbox is co-regulation. Humans borrow regulation from each other. Infants regulate by hearing their mother's heartbeat. Soldiers regulate by trusting their partners on the line. Teams regulate when a leader models calm and steadiness. When a leader understands this, they stop seeing trauma reactions as defiance or laziness. They see them as signals, and that changes everything. Instead of punishing dysregulation, they build safety. Instead of escalating conflict, they learn to de-escalate. Instead of losing trust, they create it. I'll be honest, I used to think leadership meant always pushing forward, no matter what. If someone wasn't keeping up, I thought the solution was to motivate harder. But over time, I learned that many of the people I was leading weren't lacking motivation. They were carrying trauma. Their bodies were in survival mode, and no amount of pep talk could override their physiology. When I started leading from a trauma-informed perspective, everything shifted. I slowed down. I built in safety. I recognized triggers, and I saw people rise, not because I demanded it, but because their nervous systems finally felt safe enough to grow. So how do you lead through the science of trauma? Recognize signs of dysregulation. Hypervigilance, withdrawal, irritability, sudden shutdowns. These are not personal attacks. They're nervous system adaptations. Respond with regulation. Lower your voice. Breathe steadily. Offer clarity. Your nervous system becomes their anchor. Normalize recovery. Make space for breaks, debriefs, and self-regulation. Trauma isn't healed by ignoring it. It's healed by integrating it. Educate yourself and your team. Share the science. When people understand their own nervous systems, shame decreases and agency increases. Here are a few questions that you can ask yourself. How often do I pay attention to the nervous systems of those I lead, not just their words or actions? Do I tend to escalate or de-escalate whenever the tensions rise? How might I bring more regulation into the spaces that I lead? The science is the strategy. Here's the truth that I invite you to carry. If you are leading people, you are leading nervous systems. Trauma isn't weakness, it's wiring. And leadership that ignores that wiring risks creating more harm than good. Leadership that honors the science, leadership that regulates instead of dysregulates, becomes a force of healing. The science cannot be separated from leadership. The science is the strategy. So thank you for joining me here on Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines. This is our trauma-informed leadership series. And if this episode speaks to you, share it forward, because the more leaders understand the science of trauma, the more our communities can rise, not in chaos, but in strength. Rise up out of the ashes of your experiences and lead your life with fire. If you want to know more about bringing the Rise Up Phoenix Trauma and Crisis Institute trainings to your organization, book a connection call using the link in the description.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement.